So next we have Mostafa Younesie presenting question of the proper name in Philo Mutatione Nominum, and I'll let Mostafa correct me.
The title of my paper is about the question of proper names in Philo Mutatione Nominum. In my representation, I want to consider Alexandrian Philo's conception of personal proper names. The primary source for such research is his authentic writing called Mutatione Nominum, which lies within onomastica sacra. Therefore, I want to explore and extract Philo's understanding of the proper names of some selected religious human beings. Within Hellenistic Judaism, Philo considers naming the core topic for discussion about language. Thus, such a topic is not something arbitrary and idiosyncratic, but relies on a long and deep intellectual tradition, though contains different epistemological and ontological backgrounds. In him, human beings, either ordinary or extraordinary ones, such as Adam, can name the essence of existent entities by understanding their natures by their minds and accordingly make mimetic names for them. It means that if we can grasp and understand the nature of any existing thing, we can name it. But if the essence of any existing thing is not graspable and understandable, we can name it. Accordingly, God too can do the act of naming, but he doesn't. I speak about this notion later on. This is a very general image of naming process in the human sphere, and there are no sign of name categorization. When we read Philo Mutatione Nominum, we observe that a new conception and class of name as kurion onoma comes into existence. This specific form is absent in Plato and Stoics, though its notion exists. At the same time, the mentioned form is available in Aristotle with a specific meaning, though it is in Galen, Harpocration, Futius, and Celius with its customary meaning. Accordingly, the concern of this paper is about the quality that makes a name proper in Philo's conception of it in his mentioned writing through his words and pertinent examples. The first title, Philological Aesthetics and Survey. Within the context of classical philology, the explicit compound form of kurion onoma and its verbal forms are used about 35 times in different fields, among them theology, by around 16 authors. The nearest to time of Philo of Alexandria is lexicographer and grammarian Harpocratian Alexandrianus. Among them, we can read the use of this compound by the famous and master Greek grammarian Apollonius Disculus from Alexandria too. The first explicit evidence for use of kurion onoma in Aristotle Poetics, chapter 21, the thing is that in Aristotle, it implies a name that is currently used in a certain community of speakers, as opposed to one which is a foreign law. Here I have a Greek quote of the Aristotle. I pass over it. Here Aristotle classifies names into 8 categories, and among them, Golotan, Kai, Kurion, that he considers them as a distinct pair that should be translated accordingly. It seems that for him, being kurion is a quality that makes a name authoritative and current among a specific community of people, while for another community, it has no authority and currency. According to his own example, the currency of the name Sigonon among Cypritus with its own currency among Athenians exemplifies his point. Consequently, among different English pair translations, such as ordinary, accurate, current, rare, proper, common, popular, unpopular, usual, unusual, common, uncommon, and the like, the pair current and uncurrent is more suitable and justifiable. Although Aristotle uses the compound glotta kaikorion, his conception of this formation in this opposite has distance from the conception of the personal proper name that we read its concept in Stoics. At the same time, it should be noted that in Aristotle, to interpretazione, we have the separation of the individuals, such as kalias, from universals, such as a man. Too. Though this is a controversial idea, it seems that here, through examples and terms individuals and universals, Aristotle has proper and common names in his mind. The second subtitle, within the philological aesthetics, here are also Plato and Stoics who don't use explicitly the compound kurion onoma as a proper name, but have such an idea implicitly in their minds that comes out in their pertaining examples and distinctions. Regarding Plato, the famous case study is Cratylus, which is about the correctness of names, and within such a complex text, we can read his relatively ambiguous differentiation between common nouns and proper names, without introducing or using a specific term for each one. With putting many arguments in parentheses or epoche, we read this from Cratylus. I have this translation. Here we are faced with three groups of Greek proper names that each group signifies a common Greek name as follows. Stynax, Hector, and Archepolis signify the king. Group B, Agis, Polemarchus, and Epomelechus. Epolemus signify the general, and group C, Diatrocles and Asimbrotus signify the physician. Without going into details, here are three common distinct names such as king, general, and physician, and each group of proper names signified each one of them. As a result, the idea of proper names and common names exists in the mind of Plato without explicitly discussing them. Yes. Besides, when we consider Stoics manuscripts, we also observe in the reduction of the notion of proper names in their categorization of names. By this, we mean the class of onoma as proper names in distinction from prosigoria as appellative or common name. We can read the core of this thought and distinction in Diogenes Laertius. Here I have a literal translation of Laertius. According to these key terms, the basis of appellative or common nouns and proper names is the existence of different common and proper qualities, which necessarily leads to account them differently. The former should be signified and the latter indicated. As we know, in Stoic discourse, qualities are the qualified state of the body that by which each body is differentiated. For more, see. Another main topic is about the features of Philo Mutatione Nominum. Given my short survey, and before exploring the term curio onoma as a nomen proprium in Philo, it's necessary to have an overall picture of the selected source. Apart from specific idiosyncrasies, it is the last treatise of Philo, still exempt of continuous verse by verse and exclusively allegorical exegesis rather than exegesis that Philo compiled in the book of Genesis. Accordingly, we should be aware that his discussion about proper anthroponyms takes shape and is situated in the field of onomastica, sacra. Besides, Philo's approach and method toward these selected proper names are a specific kind of allegorical, theological exegesis rather than exegesis. Thus, in such a texture, we want to explore and infer his possible reception and narration of the selected personal proper names which exist in the book of Genesis. The first subtitle, Curio Onoma for God. This is a question from Philo. Given the use curia onoma, not only in relation to God, but also to human beings, we consider the mentioned compound term in these two spheres in order to see what can be Philo's conception of it. It seemed that be influenced by Plato's Cratylus, Philo makes interconnections among being naming or being knowledge name. And as a necessary result, he thinks that the unknowable being is an unnameable being. We can only say that the unknowledgeable entity exists, and this is the primary immutable abstract rule about it. If God or being is unknowable, then it is unnameable. And within theology, it reminds us of the negative theology that leads to the negation of any name and attribution from God, and only speaking of anonymous God. Akatono mastos. And in the philosophy, the existence versus subsistence debate. This implies that any name making and name giving is possible wherever the referent is knowable. More precisely, here Philo speaks of a specific kind of name that is onomakurion. And it is not a name in general, universal or common. In such a context, as sacra onomastica, it can mean that human beings can't make for or give any acceptable, legitimate name to being with big B. Though when we continue our reading, it becomes clear that we need to address God, and for this purpose, use of some specific, limited personal proper names is necessary and permissible. Moreover, in Philo, being or God is simple, and making names make him compound, since names are separate and distinct additions that are put about him, are additions that are put about him. But what about a sphere that somehow is out of God, in which human beings, as a kind of onomastic animal, are surrounded by names that they make and give themselves or are given by the others? It seems that the absolute negative rule takes an exception, and it becomes possible to give only to onomakurion or acceptable and legitimate names to the being, big B. Philo accounts for such development and exception by using important two key terms, prosereseos and katachrisai. We can say the first word, prosereseos, is used mostly after than before Philo. Interestingly, we have such a word in Plato Cratylus. I pass over the direct quotations. In this very enigmatic and condensed paragraph, the four notions that Philo needs are embedded: esteem, ousia, enai, prosraisis. Initially, Plato makes a distinction between the properties of any subject and its true essence. Then he concludes that essence is being excluded from the color and sound to all the other things that can be addressed to exist. Though this equivalent is saying such a notion opens the door to the very crucial verb to be in Greek philosophy. At the same time, the second word, katachrisai, is used a few times before and after Philo. Interestingly, it is used 4 times in Plato also. I have the former translation. Here, Callianius gives an account of the geometers, astronomers, and calculators who don't know how to use their discoveries, and as a result, hand over them to dialecticians in order to do the necessary thing with their votes. Literally, katachrisai is from the preposition kata, meaning down, negative, often in a negative sense, plus chrisai, to use. and as whole means to disuse or strained use. Besides this, it is difficult to give a precise and general definition of it, though its development has two hard and soft versions. According to this account, philo perception is closer to hard one. Given this short rhetorical and grammatical picture, the English equivalence of appellation and according to necessity seems suitable for proseresis and katachrisai, respectively. As a result, human beings in becoming word can loosely address God, and they are permitted by God himself to use two names, Kurios and Theos, as the second best for him, with big H. Therefore, when Philo uses the compound kurio onoma for God, he means the legitimate and acceptable name, though in essence, being with big B as being has no proper name. In other words, in becoming word as the sphere of human beings, when they want to address God, it's permissible that they use two titles or misused words as acceptable, legitimate, and a word as proper names, onoma kurion, as the title of this paper. The second subtitle, Human Proper Names within Sacra Onomastica. According to Philo's dealing with names into Mutatione Nominum, we can be sure that he considers that names have epistemological value for moral ontological inquiry about definite and monoreferential human beings as individuals with distinctive names within the Holy Book. Therefore, names are the main agent in affording knowledge about the nature and qualities of human beings. This account implies a specific reception and conception of proper personal names that is concern of this paper. When we take a general look at the catalog of personal religious names from 60 to 129 in the Mutatione Nominum, we see that Philo considers a few selected individual male and female biblical human beings who bear specific names without any doubt. He shows that each name refers to a definite human being and signifies some information about the name. Refers and signifies in the quotation marks. Philo begins his catalog with a definite male human being called Abram. And then he shows the name of the same man for a benefactory reason, which because of its concealed nature, it is comprehensible only for a few individuals, and this enigma should be unconcealed to interpretation. This Abram is changed to Abraham. We observe the addition of the letter alpha to the previous personal name, but the God as both lawgiver and name maker. In him, the hermeneutical base meaning of Abram is uplifted father. That is the same as read in a scholarly etymology of it as the father of elevation. His hermeneutic formula of this male name has two parts that he narrates allegorically. In the uplifted father, the second word father means the one who produces wisdom. And the first word means the one who contemplates and works on the upper world, or about things such as sun, moon, and stars. He is a cosmologist, naturalist, meteorologist, astronomer, and lover of learning about such things. Therefore, in the texture of Holy Book, the name Abram refers only and merely to a definite male who may never be confused with anybody else. At the same time, this name declares some condensed hidden information that should be interpreted hermeneutically about the specific identity of its name bearer. Here Philo used 2 times the term dunameon about name. This is very crucial and we need to speak about it. As a general word, it denotes power, might, strength, force, and capability to do something that is that in proportion to its subject, its extension are different. The context of a name and naming, it can mean that any name, even in concealed form, should have the power and capacity to convey the pertinent thought, idea, and meaning Otherwise, it's not a name. This is the core idea of Philo about the characteristic of name and naming. Then the name of the same individual for moral reasons is changed to God by God to Abraham, and Philo interprets it allegorically as the elect father of sound, in distinction of the father of multitude as a customary and usual etymology. As we can see, the second God substituted name has three parts, and one extra letter is added to the first name, and the meaning becomes the wise or wisdom lover. Therefore, any human name should both refer and signify, indicate some thought, notion, and idea, and it can be considered as its content. As a result, in such texture, it seems that the correct equivalent and denomenon is indication, designation. Therefore, in the Greek language, the specific male name being human being bears the name Abraham, and the same person, when changed in spirit, bears the name Abraham in Hebrew. The second name is called by God for moral reason, in order that the named person change his way of thinking and living from an unfavorable condition to the favorable and preferred name that God made for him. Therefore, God doesn't make name. He only changed the name. In other words, the male person who has the name Abraham and Abraham has the same body, but when his way of thinking, living changes from nature and meteorology into ethics, theology, and piety, the change of his name signifies substitution of a different cast of mind and life in the same body. I pass over to consider another, because I have not so much time. Now we consider Philo a kind of sacred feminine name, Sarai and Sarah, that formally are different in the letter rho. Crucially, before giving his own hermeneutical narration about these feminine names, he reminds us that it's very important that the name themselves, men un onomato tato, indicate or denote or to declare specific facts or happenings and doings. Sorry. And after these, he gives his comparative account on the basis of Genesis and species for each of them. The mentioned complex of words is basic for understanding Philo's conception of the properness of personal human names, which he considers. Conclusions. This is a nutshell of my idea and hypothesis. The phenomena and event of name making and name changing is the core of Philo's perception of sacred onomastics. For it is essentially through the act of name creating, giving, baptizing, declaration, semantic bleaching, and similar practices that name is made, not given. It is noteworthy that Philo makes no distinction between name giving with name making and the other involved terms. No qualifying word is used for giving names, and name giving is rather synonymous with name calling, and these cases are left without any more details. Properness of any personal proper name shows a specific reference with a specific designation. Then it must be accepted and called by a specific community of people and used in its manuscripts too. Therefore, the relation of the name and named of proper name and human being within the sacred onomastics is both referential and designative, both in quotation. Thereby, properness in quotation of proper names indicates a definite human reference and its meaning that is based on allegorical interpretation of the name etymology. These are main segments of my hypothesis. Besides, in most cases, Philo moves from the interpretation of proper names to their symbolization. In the meantime, regarding the title of my selected writing, for religious and ethical reasons by God, who is anonymous, names, human names are changed based on diverse modes of changes, and as a result, we observe the phenomena of double names. A human can have two names. It has the reason. The reasons for name changing are dominantly religious, and modes of change are the addition of letters, metonymy, and the introduction of an entirely new name. In order to make comprehensible the change of human names and its rational, Philo bases his interpretative account on the etymologies that are complemented by external grapheme, form plus internal semantic context, and allegorical hermeneutic of names. Therefore, as a conclusion, all these doings are performed within an appropriate version of the Middle Platonic ethic that is called Hellenistic Judaism, and is based on the role of virtues to life by nature, instruction, and practice. Under a God who is the sole interpreter, agent, and changer of what is to what should be, both of them on quotation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Anyone have questions? You can put them in the chat or you can raise your Zoom hand. I had a question. Could you talk a little bit more about the term, the hermeneutic formula?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you for your question. Because essentially, Philo thinks that the names have a concealed meaning. Therefore, essentially, he wants to figure out and to extract the hidden meaning. Therefore, for every word that he introduces, he uses a specific kind of hermeneutic, in its specific meaning, that it wants to go to its first meaning that is different from interpretation. Therefore, from the name of Abraham, he wants to go to Abraham, and from Abraham, he wants to see what's the specific and authentic meaning of Abraham. Therefore, he calls this process a kind of formula that we can apply for every name, personal name. This is a method for extracting the meaning in Philo. That's it.
Okay, all right, thank you. That's helpful. Thank you so much. There's a question in the chat if you could speak more about negative theology.
Yes, as in relation to the proper names of God, this theology emphasizes about that it's better that we don't say anything or attribute anything to God, rather than we, for example, say many different names or attributions to God. For example, as you know, for example, in Islam, they say that God has 100 names, 100. Therefore, with any name, you represent God. But according to negative theology, God is the one who exists. That's it. And we can say, therefore, he's kind, he's compassionate, he is beneficent, or any other quality we can't contribute to him. Therefore, we negate any attributions to God. This is the meaning of negative theology.
That makes sense. Thank you. And then in the chat it says, which would explain why God just tells Moses his name is I am.
It's interesting. I am, as the questioner mentions, I am means I exist. Therefore, it's only ontologically, it's right. You can say that I am or I am not. But you can say I am powerful or I am kind, I am merciful. As I said, his name is I am. But as I said, as Philo says, it's necessary that human beings should address God. Therefore, they need the names, and it's a very necessary instrument for human beings to communicate with God. Say, for example, any name. But if in this form that's I am, it's not helpful to communicate with God. Therefore, God permits that human beings use two names, Kurios and Theos, and only with as I said, metaphorically, these two proper names, human beings can communicate with God. But absolutely, God is. God is, and God is. And secondary, we can say God is Theos or God is Kurios. These are the second best.
Thank you so much, Mostafa. Are there any more questions? All right, let's move on to our final speaker of this session.